help women, save lives, and peacefully end abortion where you live.
I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired.
You were serious about that?
Be inspired to change hearts and minds by joining over 1 million volunteers taking part in the global movement happening in your neighborhood.
She says, pray that I can get through this abortion. And I said, oh, no. So she went ahead and went into the abortion clinic. And she just came out. She told us, I'm not going to get the abortion. We just had a baby saved. We had a baby saved in Memphis today. Praise the Lord.
This is the 40 Days for Life podcast with your host, Sean Carney.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the 40 Days for Life podcast. I am Sean Carney, the president of 40 Days for Life, and your host for this podcast, which is dedicated to helping you end abortion where you live. And you can do just that right now at a record number of Lent 40 Days for Life campaign locations, 604 cities right now participating. Welcome to March. For those of you who follow this podcast, we're even that much closer to St. Patrick's Day. And so get excited. We're plowing through the campaign and good things are happening, and we are going to cover some good things today. We have covered a lot. No one's complained. I don't think they would. It's very important. It's huge ramifications for particularly 40 Days for Life. If you go out and you peacefully pray at an abortion facility, which is what we do, and we hear from the former Planned Parenthood workers, the no-show rate goes up as high as 75%. We just had the Planned Parenthood executive in Northern California complaining to the media. Thank you, Jesus. They normally don't do that. They conceal this information. She was giving a media interview and complained about doubling the no-show rate of the abortion appointments in Planned Parenthoods throughout Northern California. So congratulations. We know it's effective. So how will they stop us? By the DOJ and the FBI, who are not friends of this podcast, but they do watch and listen to this podcast. And so we welcome them as well. We are going to talk to Mark Houck in a moment. We've covered this case a lot. I will say before we bring him on, and just, one of the things about this is when it all went down, we can't talk to Mark, and he can't be on the podcast. And so we have been communicating a lot of things. And some of it, we had the pictures of the raid and, the FBI saying, we don't have a SWAT team. We don't even own AR-15s. I don't know. It looks like SWAT team and AR-15s. We're not stupid. So we've been talking about these things. And I will say, since Mark has won big and handed the ridiculous DOJ and the FBI a well-earned, well-deserved embarrassment, since that has happened, he's been able to talk. And I think what you will discover today is it's worse than what we thought it is from my personal standpoint. And that we really have our work cut out for us with the pro-life bigotry from our own government. We've mentioned many times, no issue with 40 Days for Life. We've been doing this since 2007. David and I launched it nationally. Fall of 2007. Bush DOJ, 8 years of Obama DOJ, no issue. 4 years of Trump DOJ, no issue. And I've even said the first 18 months of the Biden DOJ, no issue. And then the Supreme Court, without asking us, did what they should do, which is overturn Roe v. Wade, which was bad law, according to Ginsburg. So they overturned Roe. I guess the FBI is mad about that. The DOJ is mad about that. Biden is mad about that. And they start persecuting us. And this is where we get to Mark Houck. So that is the update. It is a little worse than what I thought. We're going to get into it with Mark. He is a 40 Days for Life volunteer. But because this is obviously a legal podcast, we can't help ourselves but to welcome back to the podcast by high demand. People are emailing from other countries. We need more Matt Britton on the podcast. The demand is through the roof. And that is Mr. Matt Britton, our general counsel. Matt, welcome back.
Thank you, Sean. And it's true, actually, what you said. I just did our kickoffs in Florida, including
It's true. I am in high demand. If I
Sarasota. I know. I mean, it sounds arrogant, but it's they were like, they went out there and they specifically told me to tell you and Steve more Matt, and they shouted that out. It was kind of embarrassing till I realized it was from that poll where Steve Carlin, who is listening but can't participate right now, so it's a little bit unfair, but I'm going to do it anyway. He cut me out for like 6 or 8 months to despite the fact that I was wildly the most popular guest that you have. But I'm glad to be here. I wanted to tell people that I am not disrespecting them with my stubble here. It's just my Lenten beard. It is cold here. It's hunting season. I really should have had a beard. So
You're in Montana for the record.
Yeah, exactly. And there's snow all about, really, like 2 feet on the ground. It's beautiful today, though, in the high 40s and sunny. But anyway, so it's just my Lenten beard coming in. My kids tell me it shows just how old I am, which I've never denied, but they like to tell me that. So if I look older, I am, but I'm not any less haggard, any more haggard or tired for the pro-life or for great patriots like Mark Houck, who we have today. And I know we want to get right to him because he's the most wanted man in America in many ways by pro-lifers, but also by the DOJ.
Yeah, well, that's a lot. That's a very weighted comment. So Mark was victorious. We will bring him on. Mark Houck, we are so honored to have you, the father of 7. Of course, had his house raided by the FBI. We'll get we'll get to all that stuff. But Mark, how are you doing? I know you haven't been doing anything the last few weeks, just kind of twiddling your thumbs.
No, it's been busy. Thanks for having me, Sean and Matt. It's great to see you in person. We've talked on the phone many months ago, but it's great to see your face, and the beard looks good on you.
You're a genius. Smarter than I even thought before.
It does look good. So Mark, let's back up before we get to all the drama. Are you from Philly?
So look, when anybody that says they're from Philly is usually from the suburbs of Philly, but that's just because no one would know where Kittnersville is. But I live in the 3rd largest county in Pennsylvania called Bucks County, and we're about an hour and a half outside of Center City, Philadelphia. But whenever I travel, of course, I'm always going to say I'm from Philly because no one's going to know anything otherwise. But yeah, we're right outside the city.
You know, Mark, normally I'd say, hey, don't say where you live. The FBI might come in.
That's already happened.
I guess the cat's out of the bag.
That's right. Sorry about that.
You know, in some weird scenario, they may drive to your. Well, no, that's the wrong podcast. Okay, so you're all in Phillies, Eagles, all of that.
At one time, yeah. I'm home. I'm a homeschool dad, and we don't have TV, so I get a little of that. Yeah.
Well, as a Cowboy fan, I'm so glad to hear that you no longer watch the Eagles. That's wonderful to hear. And your wife, is she from PA as well?
That's right. Yeah, just outside the city as well. Yep.
Okay. So how did you first hear about 40 Days for Life?
So I've been involved in the pro-life movement since 2003, full time. So when you guys were launching the national outreach, which stemmed from your time in College Station, I was on that thread. Somehow I got on that thread, and I was aware of all that. Man, we were doing 24-hour vigils at the beginning, right? So I was all part of that. I was all part of the night watch at the Planned Parenthood in Bucks County, and I remember emailing David, doing the Jericho March around the abortion mill at 3 a.m. And although we didn't have trumpets, we were pretending like we had trumpets. And I remember the very beginning. I miss those days.
Yeah, the early days were fun. And if you turn the clock back, David and I did the trainings live, the electoral leader trainings on these phone calls. And then he and I were like, this isn't a system. We got to record this and get it out there. But it is the early days. No, it's funny. You can't recreate that, right? Because now 40 Days is in 1,500 cities, and praise God, it's awesome. It's grown, but with that, you lose some of those random things we were doing in the early days. Okay, so obviously, when you heard about 40 Days for Life, you said, "I'm going to participate." You're a long-time pro-lifer. You have 7 kids. It probably never occurred to you that in October of 2021 you would have all of this happen. So Let's go on ahead and turn the clock back, because this was your introduction to Matt Britton as well. You go out and you're praying, and Bruce Love, who, by the way, that's the guy's real name. I know people like throw his name. It sounds like a made-up name. There is another Bruce Love, and he is an actor. He's not a very successful one, but appropriately, he is most known for a movie called Water Rats. Water Rats. I don't recommend you see that. So there's a little Bruce Love fact that maybe didn't come out of the trial. So this guy, we encounter Bruce Loves across the we encounter Bruce Loves across the country. But this is like the typical, he harasses you, he harasses your kids. So take us through that day.
Sure. And I've known Bruce for years. I mean, it's not the first time I had any negative interaction with him. And, look, we try to always stay positive and encourage even the people that are volunteering for the Planned Parenthoods of the world. And so, I'll challenge Bruce over the years to, repent and give his life to Christ. But I got to know his story, a divorced guy, and he's a wounded guy. So he's had his negative interactions, and usually it just is what it is.
Was it ever positive? Did you ever have any positive?
I watch him be positive as he's interacting with his own staff, his own people, but then
not to you.
Oh, not to pro-lifers. No, it's
okay.
He's known as the most aggressive descort, as we might call them, in the location where we do all these vigils. So he's got a reputation. He's had run-ins with a lot of people. This is not the first time he's had an altercation either. But in this case, Mark, my son, Mark Jr., has been going down with me for a good year and a half. And so he's met Bruce, and Bruce talks to him. And every time I tell him, don't talk to him. And usually he'll back off, right? When I say, please, you don't have permission to talk to him, just talk to me. But on this particular day, he wasn't backing off, and and this is October 13th. The day the sun danced, 2021, he was just kept coming after Mark. So that was unusual for him, and it seemed like it was something he was told to do, because he was nowhere near where he normally stands. As you know, they usually stand in a certain spot at the gates or entrance of the buildings usually. So in this case, he was out of position. Something didn't seem right.
There were two. So you've known him, and you know that I've been to this location. I've done a couple of kickoffs for y'all, and Dr. Monique Rubaru and Patrick, sure, who, and there's another location, isn't there? That's also a 365. Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry is alive and well for the underserved minority of Philadelphia, aren't they?
Surely.
The last time I was there, Mark, there were also a lot of police around, but they weren't arresting you. There were thousands of police officers because the Breonna Taylor verdict had come out, and Black Lives Matter was marching. And I found it interesting, and I wonder if Bruce Love might want to know, that those folks marched right past us in front of the gates where you were near the corner, and no one got hurt. They didn't yell at my kid. They didn't curse at me. They didn't tell me anything. Of course, we do know that when the other side is cursing and yelling at us, we're doing our job, right? Because the demons inside them are rumbling. And as you alluded to, that's the miracle of the sun. Maybe that had something to do with it. But Mark, I wanted to make sure we didn't forget that not just an ongoing relationship, but there were two incidents, really, weren't there? And one time he actually went after you across the street, and
so I'll take
he
you
didn't
back
get charged.
Yeah, I'll take you back to it. That was the evidence that Planned Parenthood destroyed. So on October 13th, Mark and I arrive. We start praying our rosary. We're praying in Latin because Mark says the devil hates Latin. So we pray it in Latin. And we're there for about 45 minutes before a woman even comes out of the building. So it's very quiet, normal day on a Wednesday. It's a day that they do have abortions, surgical abortions. And but we didn't have any women coming out. Most of them were in at that point. At about 12:45, two women walk out. Now I'm about 50 feet from the gate. So I'm nowhere near the entrance. And so I'm not blocking anybody's access to.
And they're coming out anyway.
Right. And they're exiting. They're leaving. Now, I don't know what they had. I don't know how long they've been in there. They didn't look like they had a surgical abortion. They might have had the birth control pill, or they might have had the abortion pill, or they might have been there for a variety of reasons. Nonetheless, I pick them up on the corner to talk to them, and I begin to walk with them, escort them to the Pregnancy Resource Center, which is another 50 feet on the next block. So I'm in the process of escorting these young ladies, talking to them, trying to give them some literature, informing them of what alternatives might be available to them, not knowing all the details of why they were there. Well, Mr. Love runs, literally, my son watches this. He runs from 100 feet away to interrupt and get in the way of me and my conversation with these two young ladies. And of course, he successfully does it. I'm not even aware he's coming over. And he just positions himself, barricades himself between me and the girls. So as we're walking, he becomes a wedge and essentially stops me from engaging the ladies. And of course, I'm kind of startled by it. And there was a bit of an interaction, a bump, if you will. But nothing further than that. No one fell, nothing like that.
And the FBI swooped down on him and arrested him for a FACE Act violation because you were
in the
trying.
Penitentiary.
Yeah,
right.
No,
That's
that didn't happen. But let me just set the scene for everybody who may not be familiar. You're in public, right?
Sure.
In the public forum,
Sure.
the place that the First Amendment guarantees you the right to assemble and peaceably speak. We all call that the right of free speech, the only country that has it enshrined in the right. So this is where you've been thousands of times, or at least many hundreds, right?
Sure, surely.
Nobody ever arrested you or beat you up or anything, right? Okay. And then, and he ran to you, right?
That's right. Yes.
And these women were coming out of an abortion provider, right?
Correct.
So it would be very difficult. And you got charged with a misdemeanor on that day, right?
Not that day. No,
Okay.
that day.
No, you got charged with a misdemeanor because of that day. Is that right?
Oh, yes. Yes.
So even though two women couldn't possibly have been going into an abortion facility and you couldn't possibly have been blocking them, and in fact, you were helping them to choose life, you also got charged. One of your two counts was that day.
That's right. That was the first one. Yep.
Okay. So I bring that up, Mark, because to me, that's very striking. As a former prosecutor, I was elected DA, a state DA, for 4 terms, although I was a special assistant U.S. attorney as well. And not in Philadelphia. And had I been there, this wouldn't have happened to you. But this was striking to me that you were the victim actually in both, but certainly in this, and that there was a potential FACE Act violation by the perpetrator. And it was so orchestrated that was turned around on you. Now, it would be no surprise that Planned Parenthood would do that. They're purveyors of death. Why wouldn't they lie? But it's amazing that the DOJ did that. And that's the first instance, right?
That's right. Yeah. So, we went back to where we were before. I went back to my son and we had some words, how could you do that? What's your problem? Do you even have any fear of God? These are things I'll say to him, as I'm like, why would you do that? So he goes back into Planned Parenthood. Now, this was captured on video, but Planned Parenthood destroyed it. So this ultimately becomes the reason for the indictment. So keep that first incident.
Was that proven at trial, or is that your surmise?
That's a bit of surmise. I would say that the attorney who was involved with some of the FBI's initial investigation, because Bruce Love, when he filed a private criminal complaint, which we'll get into, he did not mention this first incident at all. Mm-hmm. So it was not part of the private criminal complaint. When it became part of the issue was with the indictment. So it would logically prove that with the 2 women leaving, because there was no women and no abortion-minded person with the next incident I'm going to describe. So it seemed to me that gave the FACE Act value or credence, whatever the word is.
And as to the video, I recall that the FBI special agent, ultimately admitted that there had been video, that he sought the video, and that Planned Parenthood, quote unquote, couldn't find it.
Yeah, it was on a 30-day loop. We learned this in the trial, and they had 30 days to secure it. Now, why wouldn't you secure that whole thing if you're thinking this is going to be something that you want to pursue? But of course they didn't. So, and that was testimony that day. But yeah, so we come back just to finish up the story, and I resume praying with my son, and Bruce goes back into the building and comes out 20 minutes later, and he makes a beeline right from my son. Now, there's no women coming out of the building. There's no women anywhere. No one's trying to get in. No one's trying to get out. He comes right up about a foot and a half away from my son and stands right next to my son. Now, he's never done this before in 40, 50 other encounters with my son. So this is out of the ordinary, and it's out of the ordinary what any escort would do. But he goes and he stands right next to my son. Now, I can't make him leave because he's entitled to stand wherever he wants to stand. But
just like you are.
That's right. Right. So I'm letting him do his thing and keeping an eye on things, but he's talking to me and I'm ignoring him. But then he starts to talk to my son. Now, again, he's talked to my son before, taught my son the F word. He's been vulgar. He said really disgusting, gross things, which I won't, embarrass anybody or say it on the air on this interview. But on this day, he starts talking twistedly to my son about the evilness of his own father. And so, as you can imagine, as a dad listening to this, all right, I'm like, okay, enough. This has to stop. So after he continues to do it, I said, look, you got to leave. You got to go back. And I was really forceful with him. And I escorted him back. And I pointed him on the video. It shows me pointing. Go back to where you normally stand. And I wasn't mixing words. So then he does. He's compliant. He actually follows my direction. I turn around to go back to be with my son. And I hear him talking to my son, like right out of my ear. I'm like, turn around, and there he is coming back to my son. So I approach him and I pushed him. Now that became like of dad's rights, of father's rights, more than First Amendment rights at that point. Right. I was just trying to protect my son. Like, you can't do this, right? You got to leave him alone. So he falls. I wasn't expecting him to fall. In fact, I was surprised he did fall, but he did fall. And that was it. There was no additional force. I diffused whatever I needed to diffuse, and it was done. Mark and I said, Mark, let's go grab some lunch. Let's take a walk. Let's let cooler heads prevail. And we went.
And his son is how old?
He's 12 at this time.
Okay, so he's a little kid. He's not like you're 17.
Yeah, he shuffled. He shuffled away from the man and showing me that he was not comfortable when it initially was happening. But we did a holy hour for Bruce. We went to the Catholic church down the road and where the Franciscans are. And we did a holy hour before the Blessed Sacrament. And then I got a text at the Civil Affairs Department. We're on site, which I said, fine, we'll come back. So, Mark, we got to go back. Knocked on their door and I said, here's my information. Here's my statement. Here's what happened. And that was it. Bruce was still there. He said, the Civil Affairs said, I don't think there's anything here, but he may press charges against you. I said, no problem. And that was it. That was the end of October.
So the authorities showed up, you get in a car wreck and the one guy says, hey, let's just exchange information. And you're like, no, I don't think that is. And you call 911 and the cops say, stay there. We'll be right there. So they came. And then the cops either say drunk driving or reckless driving. And they were like, no, this is just an accident. Right.
Right.
So just for people to know, there is a right. Well, I was thinking that John and I had to talk about that, I bet the the cops in Philadelphia have a little bit more to deal with than two guys jawing at each other on the street. But but in any event, so you don't get charged by law enforcement, right? And most people don't know that there are two systems in most states. One is the cops can show up and charge you or later refer it to the DA to charge you. That's a law enforcement charge. But there is in many states a way for anyone like us to say, well, the cops wouldn't charge, so I'm going to go to, usually they call it a magistrate, and it's sort of a judge, and you give them, and if there's probable cause, they can issue. It's not a private warrant, but it's an arrest warrant, but it's based on your say-so, not the cops. And that's actually after the civil authorities decided not to charge you. Correct. He went and he convinced some other bureaucrat to charge you, and you did get charged, right?
Yeah, the private criminal complaint, and it entered into the court system, the municipal court level, and we tried to mediate that. In fact, I was totally agreeing to that. I said, look, I understand it's a difficult situation. They didn't want me to be a Planned Parenthood for 6 months. I said, I can do that. I'll go to the other abortion mill. I'll go right there, right? I mean, look, there's plenty to choose from. But he didn't want that. Now he wanted his day in court. And even the magistrate was like, look, you're probably not going to win this. And he's like, I don't care. I want to go to court. So he just wanted his trial date, but he couldn't even bother show up for it. So after 3 or 4 court appearances, it's dismissed on April 22nd. following this October event on April 22nd, it's dismissed, done. 5 days later, I'm served on the same sidewalk where I was standing on October 13th by a Department of Justice representative with a target letter saying I'm a target of a federal grand jury investigation, which required my attorney, which was you, and you recommended Matt Heffron, to get involved and to contact the assistant U.S. attorney in Philadelphia.
So do you think that there's, sorry, Sean, just one quick question. Do you think that you talked about collusion, destruction of evidence? It seems to me, who I really don't think much conspiracy. I can't get two people to agree on anything. But do you think that there was Bruce Love or someone was in touch with the DOJ and that's why he didn't show up because he knew you were going to get targeted?
We do know that the FBI was involved in tracking the case and was in communication with his attorneys in Planned Parenthood and so forth. So they were monitoring it, and it's possible, speculating, it's possible that they told Mr. Love not to show up so that the DOJ could pick it up. I don't know that for sure.
First rule of law enforcement: no coincidences.
Yeah. So so we contacted the DOJ and assistant U.S. attorneys, and Matt Heffron said, a former federal prosecutor like you, said, you got no case here. There's case law against it in your own district, Eastern District of Philadelphia. But should you want to indict my client, no need to bring an agent out to his house. We'll bring him down to you. In fact, you know where he is every Wednesday. You could pick him up right there. But
hey, Mark, before that, in your own mind or talking with your wife at night, did it ever enter your mind, there's a difference between seeing something from the DA and seeing something from the DOJ. Was a raid ever in the back of your mind like, this is the feds, what are they going to do, bust down my door in the middle of the night? I mean, do you have any inclination that a raid was on the table?
Well, the first time anyone ever mentioned something like that was our buddy Matt Britton on this call, who was just talking in generalities about, like, if you don't cooperate and stuff like that. But no, in fact, it's April 27th. I don't know when the leak with the Sam Alito.
It's like May 4th, May 3rd.
It's like right around there. So
it's pre-leak.
It's pre-leak. So I'm not even thinking. There's no Mar-a-Lago. There's no Dobbs case ruled yet. So I'm not even thinking raid. I'm thinking this is all going to go away. This is bogus. There's nothing here. So yeah, there's no leak. And I truth be told, I had no idea what September 23rd. What happened on that day, that act of terror, that would never have entered my mind.
And it was an act of terror. Sean's used to me always hyperbole, the team, when I do legal training. They're like, Matt's always bringing up these ridiculous things.
And by the way, Mark, he trained, 40 Days for Life is officially trained on FBI dawn raids, either for my house or for our office, our HQ. We have a lot of security. So I've heard the dawn raid speech like a million times from Matt. And of course, after you hear it a lot, you're like, no, that's actually possible. Very, very on the table for 40 Days for Life, even before this happened to you. But we've heard all the extreme examples of the guy, who appears to be nice, but he's really a crack dealer under a bridge. All those things that you
they're
get
all
from
true.
A former prosecutor.
You know that now, Mark.
They're all true. Yeah.
Hey, Sean, I wanted to make sure you covered, because it was important to me and I think important to Mark. One of the reasons he was like, this is all going to go away and this, you're not guilty of this, is because we told him that. And he's not guilty of it. And, I immediately said, we need to get a federal prosecutor, and we got Matt Heffron. And we worked on this letter, which Matt signed. It's just incredible to me, Mark. And Sean, I know you feel this way too. We live in the United States of America. I'm retired law enforcement. We serve the people. They don't serve us. This isn't like you show up and just make up the law. We don't enforce the not law. We enforce the law. And we don't just ask people to move along because it's convenient. We make sure they can stay there safely because it's constitutional. But in any event, that didn't happen to you. And we sent the DOJ a letter, didn't we? The prosecutor that sent you the target letter, explaining why you were innocent and trying to work out that if they made the wrong decision to charge you, we turn you in. That was never, ever addressed. Subsequent calls were not addressed. And, for me, if I had done that, I would have worried that someone would file an ethical complaint against me, because this was pageantry and show. And when you have counsel, normally the prosecutor jumps for joy because they don't have to waste resources, and that something could go wrong. You know,
Yeah.
maybe you send a SWAT team fully armed down the streets of Philadelphia and some gang starts shooting at them. You know, you don't know what's going to happen. You never know. Now, you were a compliant, law-abiding citizen, as you always have been, so nothing went wrong, but something else could have gone wrong. They could have run over.
Let's get into that. Let's get into that, because on the podcast, we've talked a lot of, and 40 Days for Life, through our history, I mentioned earlier, we talked to the FBI. I know a lot of FBI agents, a lot of great Catholic FBI agents, a lot of good Christian FBI agents. We talked to the DOJ. We've always worked with them. And believe me, a lot of them were rooting for you.
For sure. I know a lot too, and they're on your side.
Yeah, their own shameful agencies. These whistleblowers is like they're multiplying by the day. So there's a reason for that. But before you take us through the detail, what we've had to talk about from afar up until this point, because everything was going on, was we have the picture of the raid. We'll put that on the screen. The guys on your doorstep, which you'll go to in detail. But there's the elephant in the room, Mark, which I'm sure you have just banged your head against the wall, and we've been joining you in that, which is there were multiple meetings. When the FBI goes and they raid a house, there's a lot of clearance. They just don't decide to do it on a whim. Right. And there are multiple people, good people, in those rooms going, I don't know if we should raid the guy's house who has 7 kids with no record. Like maybe number one, he's innocent and we look stupid. And number two, this just looks bad. I don't know if this is a good idea. And all those people are told to shut up. And so that leads us to you're making breakfast. You're one of the dads. You're in charge of breakfast. I'm in charge of breakfast also. So you're making breakfast.
Yeah, I'm up at 6:30. We got co-op. It's a homeschool co-op day. So for non-homeschoolers, that's a day where your kids get out of the house, which is nice. It's a great day to get out and just interact with other homeschool families. And I put a quiche in the oven, and that's a quick breakfast, and I like quiche, so I'm not afraid to admit that.
Okay. You put like
I wonder if
Tabasco
Bruce
sauce
loved
on it?
like
Yeah, no, hot sauce only in Texas, not up here in Pennsylvania.
Right.
Yeah, we had it in the oven. Oven was on, and it's dark in September 23rd in the fall. It's there's no light out here at that time, not daylight savings yet. So it's about 6:45. And there's a banging at the door. Now, I'm talking heavy thud banging. And then the doorbell's rung, pressed 6 or 7 times and rings up the whole house. Now, everyone's asleep. All 7 of my children are asleep. My wife, I just gently woke up. So obviously I'm like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. All they yelled was open up. They didn't even announce who they were. I didn't even know who they were. So in Philadelphia and Bucks County, where it's deer hunter paradise,
oh yeah,
most people would be coming to the door with a weapon or something in their hand, because this sounds like an intruder or something bad is happening. Sure. So I cannot see what's going on. Now my wife's above me and she can see the whole layout of everything. She got a good look of everything. All the lights are on. No sirens ringing, but the lights are on. When I said, who is it? Because I'm like, who is banging on my door? And they said, bang, bang, bang. It's the FBI. Open up. So I was like, all right, I'm right at the door. I said, stay calm. I'm communicating to them. Clearly this guy is agitated. Clearly this guy is concerned, overly concerned. And I need to diffuse whatever's going on. I said, stay calm. I have 7 babies in here. I was in protector mode as dad. I got children. Oh my gosh, what's going on? I thought a deer was hit or somebody was hit or, maybe if something crashed into my property. I have no idea. I'm not thinking rescue babies. I'm not thinking DOJ. I'm not thinking target letter. I opened the door and I cannot believe, because actually I should say.
You believed them when they said it's the FBI, you believed them.
I did. And Matt Heffern called me in August. This is a good point that I should have mentioned. He called me in August and he said, have you heard from the AUSA, Assistant U.S. Attorney? I said, no. And he said, well, she won't return my phone calls, he said to me. I said, well, I don't know. Maybe we should just let sleeping dogs lie. He's like, yeah, maybe you're right. My own attorney was like clueless. Like he didn't know what to make of it. And I'm like, okay. So I wasn't thinking this is the DOJ follow up to the April 27th bench warrant or whatever, or target letter, right? So I open the door and I see 15 marked and unmarked units. I'm not counting them up, but I got 100 yards to the road on my driveway, and they're lined up on the road. They're in my cul-de-sac, which is my house, and they're surrounding my house with their vehicles. So I can only imagine 15 marked and unmarked units. I see 5 what are now I know as agents with M16s pointed at me on the porch. And then there's all these PA state troopers behind their doors of their vehicles with pistols and guns pointed at me. And all the sirens are ringing and not making noise, but just they're the lights. And I said, what are you doing here? Like, that's exactly what I said. My hands are up. And they said, well, you know why we're here. And I'm like thinking, what a great thing to answer someone's question. How about like, we're here, sir, to arrest you and you're being charged with this? Like, I said, well, I said, you're here because I rescue babies. And I gathered my faculties and I said, this has got to be this. So then I'm looking at them all and no one responds to that commentary. And I'm looking at them all and I'm like thinking, you wouldn't be here. I said to them, I actually said this, if the Trump administration was in the White House. I just said that.
Just true.
And they all looked at me and no one said anything. Right. So then my wife comes down with her leopard bathrobe on and she says, do you have a warrant for his arrest? She was more lucid than me.
Wow.
And they said, well, we're taking him with or without a warrant. Now just ponder that for just a second.
Unbelievable.
Like, this is like Nazi Germany in the 1930s. Like, you're coming regardless. Like, are there any Jews here? They're coming with us. You know? So
are the kids
that was it. And so I recognized I was in protector mode. I'm like, you know what? I got to protect my wife and my kids. What do you want me to do? You know,
the kids are awake. Are the kids seeing this?
Kids are freaking out. They're on the steps.
Okay.
I have a step.
Crying.
Now the gun has entered the threshold of the house. Pointing at my wife and now scanning the house. There's someone in the back door as well, ready to come in. And the children are on the steps, which is right down range from the door. So it's like you open the door and there's the steps and the kids are all lined up on the steps. One kid even came down and they're crying and screaming and freaking out. So I said, you know, can I get some socks on? I got flip-flops on, a t-shirt and a pair of pants, a pair of shorts. I said, can I get some socks on? No. Can I get some pants on? No. Can I get a sweatshirt on? No. Can I brush my teeth? No. Can I put some deodorant on? No. I'm just like, dear God, like, okay, what do you want me to do? You need to get in the car with us and we're going to take you down to the city. And my wife's still asking for the warrant. So at this point, I said, can I get my rosary? They let me take my rosary. And I got in a black Suburban within like 10, 15 minutes. And
what did they say about the warrant?
So
were they just like ignoring her?
They ignored her. And then what happened?
They had to have a warrant, right?
Yeah. So what happened is they ignored her request. Instead, we're taking him with or without a warrant. When they got me in custody and had me cuffed in front of my children, the guy said, I'm going to get you a copy of the warrant. He yells to my wife. He rips off the cover letter of whatever he had and gives it to my wife. Now, I'm already in the black SUV. And I'm out of there. I couldn't even say goodbye to my children. I don't even know when I'm returning. I don't know anything. I don't even think they announced like what the charges were. They might have. I don't remember it though. It was that fast. Needless to say, I was gone and heading to the federal building, and I could tell you those group fun details if you want. But
yeah, what is this car ride like? So you're pulling out of your driveway. You know, really weird how chilly it is this morning, gentlemen. I mean, what are y'all talking about?
Yeah, there's 2 agents in the car. One driver from St. Louis, Missouri. The other guy who's next to me, who I learned was the case agent. So he's the guy that knew everything. I didn't know that.
That's a good use of federal funds. Flying a guy in from St. Louis instead of just me and Matt going down to the courthouse for free. Right. So I asked him the question. I said, "Why so many of you?" That's what I said. And
how many were there?
I'm going to guess 20 plus. So you had backup PA state troopers, and you had heavily armored vests. You had the words SWAT under the vests. You had the ballistic shields and helmets and a battering ram. Okay. And this is all, and the long guns. So About 20 plus, I would say. I didn't count them up, but it had to be. If you got 15 cars, you got at least one in each car, and there were multiple guys in cars, so at least 20 plus. I said, "Why so many?" And the driver says, "Well, sir, we don't know anything about you." And I said, "Really? The FBI doesn't know anything about me?" I find that really hard to believe. He said, "Well, we come prepared for anything." I said, "Well, I just can't find that hard. I can't believe that." But the whole conversation was about homeschooling. The agent next to me wasn't saying much. We talked. The guy who's driving wanted to homeschool his kids, his future kids, and I tell him all the benefits of that, and talked about the Eagles. We talked about everything but what just happened. I was giving them directions. No, don't go this way. Your car's not going to fit through there. Go this way.
Did they get lost on the way out?
What's that?
Did they need directions?
Well, he was on GPS and he didn't know where he was going. So I'm like, okay, don't go that way. That bridge is a low bridge.
I'll tell you where they got lost, Sean. They got lost charging this young man, and they got lost on the way there. But just so people know, in general, I can't comment on whether this guy was lying, but that's total BS. There's something called the NCIC, the National Crime Information Center and Computer, and they run that. You have a Pennsylvania state database. They knew exactly who you were, and I've done it 100 times. We call high risk transports, high risk warrant services. They had to have a warrant. They're actually supposed to lead with a warrant. In fact, we used to tape warrants to the front of the shield. Sometimes people would tape under the barrel of their gun. So it was the first thing that enters the room. Those are search warrants, however, but they did have an arrest warrant for you. They ignored Matt and my letter saying that we wanted to work it out. And if they couldn't work it out, to turn you in because you weren't guilty. And then in the car, Mark, something to think about a question I'm going to ask you later, which is, this is outrageous and stood service on its head and abused the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America. And in fact, their oaths, the same oath I took as an elected DA. So I'm going to ask you in a second whether you're going to take action on them or at least follow up in Congress or something, because I'm all for that. But I want to tell you that had they questioned you, that would have been a bar violation, an ethical complaint, because we notified the DOJ that you were represented. And so had they questioned you, not only would that have not been admissible under a case called Santabello versus New York, a U.S. Supreme Court, but it would have been an ethical violation if the lawyer, but this is what I'm saying. She was ignoring Matt Heffron, a former federal prosecutor, a colleague's call, multiple calls that I knew about, and saying, what's going on in this case? And they picked you up and said, we are prepared. That is not true. They're prepared for anything when they know it's dangerous. So I just wanted to tell people.
But I mean, right now, it's such a great point. But Mark, you're in the car. You don't even have shoes on. You're in shorts and a shirt. Right. You're now talking about the Eagles. One of the guys is like, "Hey, you homeschool." I'm thinking of homeschooling. You're talking about that. God knows what's going through your mind. So, what next? Like, where did they take you first?
Right. So we had a good hour and a half drive down to the city. Again, it's 7:00 in the morning, lots of traffic. We're heading to the federal building. And when we get to the federal building, of course, I'm cuffed to my wrist at this point. They fingerprint me. And the guy that was the driver shakes my hand and says, "It was a real pleasure meeting you." That's what he said.
Is this the homeschool guy?
This is the guy that wants to homeschool his kids. Yeah. So he has to leave, and they continue to process me, I guess. Now they shackle me in my belly. They put a belly shackle around me, and they shackle my feet. Now I have bare ankles because I only have the flip flops on, and they bring me to a white room that's no more than 10 feet by maybe 8 feet, and a table in it with a hook on the table, and they chain me to the table. And they leave me in there for 6+ hours.
They chain you to the table, and you're already in shackles. So
I don't know why I needed to be in shackles, but yes,
Matt, who would you do this to, Matt?
So the point is, you wouldn't. Can I answer first? You would never do it to someone who has no record and has 2 attorneys that are saying we'll turn the guy in, because that's going to be an issue. Which is why I said, Mark, are you going to do something? But who I would do that to?
Like he's Hans Gruber from Die Hard.
Exactly. So there's 2 people you would do this to. the very dangerous recidivist offender with a record, the guy that won't stop, the violent criminal. Because if you're a white collar guy, what is Mark going to do? Run out and advocate in front of an abortion? What are they worried about, right? I mean, even if he was guilty, which he wasn't of any of these charges, what was the danger? He was going to escape and pray. Yeah, and you know, so unless you're the person that you would do it to is Hans Gruber too. The one guy maybe doesn't have a record, like a terrorist.
Right.
A terrorist.
Mark, when they're okay, you got the shackles, and I know you're a faithful guy, and everybody knows that. We've already assumed that. We've heard you talk about it. The way that you have handled this is the example to the pro-life movement and every Christian out there. That is a given. But when you're chained to the table, I mean, are you ever sitting there going, dang, maybe not that word, but another one, like, what the heck? I mean, is there any kind of, where does this end? In the way that they're treating you. And a bizarre comment from the driver, it was great to meet you. I don't know what you're supposed to say. Yeah, we'll do it again next week. But what's going through your mind when they chain you to the table and you're in the room alone?
Right. So, the peace was in my heart, and there was a leap of faith there, trusting that God would take care of my family. When I was chained to the table, I didn't question why, but I just kind of just said, why not? Right. Like, if we're going to follow Christ, we're going to expect to be persecuted. So I entered into Mount Calvary. I was surprised in my head. I'm like thinking, is this what I got the bare ankles on? And you know what? I put cuffs on people before. I used to be in juvenile justice. I had to put cuffs on young juvenile delinquents. And you can put them on tight or you can put them on a little bit loose. They put them on real tight. And I thought, you know what? This is just to humiliate, intimidate, and instill fear. And but that's okay. I questioned it for a second. But I tell you, I was right at Mount Calvary. I the whole time. I mean, I prayed without ceasing, Sean. I truly felt blessed. I never once questioned that God wasn't. You know what was the best way to describe it to you is the saints, and I've never been here except for this one moment in my life. The saints who have achieved sanctity is because they reached the unitive way, and that's where their will and God's will is completely united. When I was chained to that table, I felt that my will and God's will was completely united. And so I had great peace. My heart was flooding with joy that I could suffer, believe it or not, in this way. Now, they had to go through pre-trial stuff, and they started to manipulate and coerce me. And they said, sir, we got questions we want to ask you. If you don't feel comfortable answering any of these questions, you don't have to answer anything. I'm like, great, let's get my attorney on the phone. We had a local attorney who was representing me in the initial case. And I was answering questions. Are you a flight risk? All this stuff that they're trying to find out. And I said one thing I wasn't comfortable answering. And they said, well, why aren't you going to answer that? I said, well, because you told me I didn't have to answer something that I wasn't comfortable answering. They said, sir, I know you're really agitated and you had a tough morning, but we need you to answer these questions. I said, well, you just got done telling me that I don't have to answer the questions if I'm not comfortable. And they said, okay, sir, clearly you're not cooperating. We need to call somebody who can cooperate with us. I said, okay, I'm at peace. I'm not agitated. Well, can we call your wife? I said, you can call my wife as long as you don't ask her the same questions you were trying to get me to answer. And they said, oh, no, we won't do that. Of course, that's exactly what they did. And they got exactly what they wanted because that's what they do. They get what they want.
What were they asking you?
They want to know the names of my siblings. Now, I didn't feel comfortable giving out the names. I told them I had siblings and they lived in the area. I said, I don't feel comfortable giving out their names. They may not like that. They may not want that. You can look them up yourself, right? I mean, I'm not going to do your work for you, but I have 4 siblings in the area, and yeah, I'm connected.
All of which they knew.
Yeah, of course. So, so there's a pre-trial hearing there, and it's just to determine whether I'm a flight risk and post bail or bond. Well, they knew I wasn't a flight risk. They were going to release me on my own recognizance, which tells you I wasn't a flight risk and that I wasn't a threat to the community. So why the show of force?
Right.
So that's exactly what happened. Of course, I was released. Well, I had to be transferred to U.S. Marshals, which is a whole nother story, which is even worse.
How was that? You're transferred to the U.S. Marshals?
Yeah. So if you watch U.S. Marshals, they're tough dudes. They're prison transfer guys. Everyone's a felon. everybody, and they treat you like it. They talk to you that way. There's no innocence. I was treated worse than I've ever been treated in my life. Now they transport me, get this, from 6th floor of the federal building down to the basement with the shackles on my waist and the shackles on my ankles, and I'm cuffed to my wrist. I'm like, is this really necessary? Like, couldn't you just take the shackles off my ankles so I don't have to shimmy my feet every 6 inches? And of course, they didn't do that.
No, it wasn't necessary because you had offered to turn yourself in. The point, Sean, that he's making is really important, and I just don't want it to be overlooked legally. He said, so under the 1984 Bail Reform Act, they say, is he a danger to himself or others? And is he a flight risk? That's all they look at pre-trial. And then they give him bail. So they made a determination that he was not a flight risk and that he wasn't a danger to himself or others. Yet they had 15 to 20 people arrest him with backup state police and guns. So they knew it from the beginning. So if you wanted to know whether it was theater, there you have it. If you wanted to know whether or not there was an alternate way with no taxpayer dollars, where we would have driven down with Mark, literally in a suit, he never would have been shackled. They have really exposed themselves here, Mark, haven't they? Are you going to do something about it?
Well, 100%. Yeah. I mean, justice requires such, right? The virtue of justice, giving to others what they're due, and God first. But in this case, the pro-life movement is due justice, and we need to pursue justice for the good of the movement, for the good of other dads and moms and people out there who could be victims in this way. So I will pursue, with your help and anyone else's help, all that we can pursue to bring whoever needs to be held accountable. We're going to be testifying before Congress in March. So, things are moving. But, we need to be prayerful. And we're praying that people at the raid, we know people that were invited to the raid, state troopers, that decided not to go to the raid. They were shown and they said, I don't want to be a part of that. So we know these people, they're out there. And we're hoping that when the body and the dash cams we tried to commandeer, apparently there were no body cams that day, and we're still waiting on those dash cams. But, we're going to pursue all this. And like I said, when I got to the marshals, they treated me like complete dirt, less than human. And then once they released me, I was reunited with my family 8 to 10 hours later.
Praise God.
You inspired so many people also to go out and peacefully pray. I want to say that from our end, because when this happened, there's a lot of, and we did have some people say, I don't know, this poor guy in Philly. I mean, am I going to get arrested because I participate in 40 Days for Life? And that's exactly what the DOJ wanted. That's exactly why we had all this theater, because they want to intimidate the pro-life movement and peaceful volunteers. Right. 40 Days for Life has a proven track record year after year after year. We're not BLM. We don't burn down gas stations. We don't tear down statues. We don't loot and raid. We stand and we peacefully pray. We've had 1 million people do it. And, their effort to put on this charade, and I'm just so sorry this happened to you. It just as an American, and certainly as a Catholic and as a pro-lifer, you handled it well, and you're the guy, and you've talked a lot about growing in holiness and how something like this, it can't help but bring your family closer to Christ. But it's not without crosses, and it's not without so many persecutions and anguish that you and your wife and all your kids have had to go through, and I'm sure your kids are going through today, seeing still. Freaking FBI.
I'm sorry it happened to you for you, Mark.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you were the guy that it happened to, rather than an obstreperous jerk, rather than someone who didn't enter Mount Calvary, rather than someone who didn't think about Alphonsus Liguori and unity and conformity with God. And you did all that, and you didn't fight back, and they were the ones with guns. And you took a hit, and you know that you bore the cross, how lucky you are, and you recognize that. You weren't lucky and your family wasn't lucky that day, but now you're a great warrior. I want to thank you. I'm wearing this tie, my Stars and Stripes tie for you today, and I had this pin on that they gave me when I participated in the feds when I was DA, and I took it off because I didn't want it to be next to the little feet that you stand for, and a true American and a true patriot. Because on that day, the oath that I took to the feds, to the United States Constitution, and to the Commonwealth of Virginia's DA. On that day, they stood it on his head. And so to the extent that I can say, I'm sorry for my brothers in blue, I am, but I'm glad it was you and not someone who maybe had a heart attack or a stroke, who wasn't so strong, or who didn't earn his way out of purgatory, or whatever you just did for you and so many of your kids. And I do want to say, on top of what Sean said, this wasn't just orchestrated. You were innocent. You didn't get found not guilty, like because a witness didn't show up, right? You were innocent from the very beginning. And I'm going to prove it. You and Sean, Philadelphia Eagles, Dallas Cowboys, great Eastern Conference rivalry. You don't watch TV anymore, but let's imagine you did. And you're standing there in front of an abortion facility, and you get to arguing about who's going to win the Super Bowl or the playoffs. And Sean shoves you. And he's a pro-abort, which of course he's not. He's a great pro-life hero. But in my scenario, and you're a pro-lifer, that is not a FACE Act violation. That's an argument about Philly cheesesteaks versus Texas barbecue. And that's what happened, right? You're protecting your kid. It has nothing to do with abortion, and they knew it. And by the way, when Bruce Love ran across the street and confronted you trying to help and choose life, the positive alternative to death mongering for money, and you were going to a nearby, maybe even near, I don't know, I couldn't tell from the map I got, but maybe even near that, why isn't he charged? Why isn't he charged? And why aren't they charging so many of the vandalisms to the why? And so we know it's kabuki theater or whatever they call it. We know that you were sort of set up, but you don't expect the Bruce Loves of the world. He's just a guy, right? He can go off the deep end. But the government, the court system, the guy that approved the warrant, that man or woman is like a judge. So I'm sorry that happened to you, but I'm glad it was you, man.
Hey, I'll tell you what, my kids are the true victims, and my wife, as you know, as you said, and they're still suffering to this day. Sean, you're right. They're going to feel the effects of this for the rest of their life. And so justice needs to be done for them as much as possible. I tell you, we were invited to the State of the Union 2 weeks ago, and a lot of Republican people, good people in the House apologized to me. I know there's good people there. Rep Scott Perry, former brigadier general, invited me down. And so, he was raided by the FBI himself with his phone. But we got some people really helping us. And the goodness is there. So hopefully we can move forward and continue to bring more light into this darkness. And I mean the light, which is our joy as a pro-life movement. And that's exactly what I said to that guy. I said, it was a joy meeting you, because I wasn't happy about meeting him, but it was a joy to be able to share Christ with him. So look, I consider it all joy because I'm talking to you now, and there's
sorry that this is the way you ended up on the 40 Days for Life podcast. We've had a lot of guests.
You're talking to us from your house as opposed to from a holding cell.
That's true.
So
yeah.
That's what I'm going to praise God for. And God bless you. And by the way, that guy's comment, he didn't meet you. He arrested you.
Yeah.
It was one-sided. So you met him and you gave him Christ, but what he said was BS along with everybody else. He didn't meet you. He arrested you. And let's be clear about that. And it's outrageous misconduct. And we're going to be praying for you and helping you. I hope you get to the bottom in the congressional, why they have a reproductive rights task force and no pro-rights task force. And you're the man leading the charge, Mark. Good, better, worse. You're Joan of Arc, and you're leading the charge. You just got called, and praise be to God, you said yes. You could have said no. When you said that the guy said, no, not me, the trooper, he said, no, not me. You didn't say that, Mark, when the pro-life. You said, yes, me. Here am I, Lord, and I'll go pray for those babies. You didn't say, no, not me, the way that trooper did. Why didn't that trooper stop it? That's what I want to know. No, not me. So I know this is wrong. I just won't participate. What did he do? Play golf? Go hunting? Get a $50 wedge salad with his wife with a little bacon crystal? Why? While you were being arrested, you said, fiat, mihi secundum, let it be done to me according to thy word. Praise be to God for you, Mark. This is not a legal matter. This is a spiritual matter, but we're going to expose it. So
yeah. Well, yeah. Let me say, telling the lawyer, it is a legal matter. The Department of Justice needs to be brought to justice. There is not a soul in America, pro-choice, pro-life, who doesn't think it's completely reasonable for you to sue their pants off. Absolutely. And we will help you do that in any way possible. I know the 40 Days for Life family completely agrees with that. You represent our ability to go out and to do what is so basic and a blessing in the United States, protected by the Constitution, which is to be a voice for those who have no voice, and to offer hope to these women, and to offer hope to those abortion workers, none of whom the DOJ could care less about. They put on this charade with our tax dollars, and they need to be punished for it justly. And we're going to help you do it. Final question.
Sure.
It's spring. We've heard your trials. We've heard the shackles. We're in the middle of Lent. April's coming. Is Mark Houck going to pay taxes this year? You going to pay your taxes?
Of course I am.
I know you're not messing with you're not messing. I just think that the ultimate act of obedience and humility in all of this from wonderful Mark is him paying his taxes after all of this. There's a Flannery O'Connor essay in there somewhere.
Well, yes, I need the refund.
Yeah. Get the refund. Get every penny.
You deserve it. You earned it.
You deserve it. Okay,
God bless you, Mark.
Thank you so much, Mark. Yeah. And one last message. What do you say to all the people that have been praying for you? I know you got to run. All the 40 Days for Life participants who've been praying for you. What do you say to somebody who's like, I don't know, man, hearing you talk, it just kind of makes me a little nervous. Should I still go out and pray?
Yeah, I've been saying this a lot, and it's been a question that's been asked even pre-trial was, what's your message? First of all, God bless 40 Days for Life. I mean, what a gift to the church and our country and our world. But I would say, don't be afraid, right? Don't put yourself in my shoes and say, well, this is going to happen to me. Just concern yourself with the will of God, which is for you to do the work of God, which is to protect human life, speak for those who can't speak for themselves, and let that be your marching orders. Don't say, oh, it happened to him, it's going to happen to me. It may, but trust that God is going to be faithful to you, that his providence will protect you, and that you got the law on your side. I mean, we really do, and our prayers are our greatest weapon. So I've been doing a lot of talks on putting on the armor of God. So I would encourage anybody, read Ephesians 6, 10 to 17, and just think about those things. And those are the things we need to do to protect ourselves and avoid those lies, because the devil wants to whisper, yeah, don't go out, you're going to get arrested. Don't get involved because you're just going to get you're going to have problems with the law. Just tell that evil one to go to hell where he belongs.
Yes. And we can do the same in so many aspects of our life during the holy season of Lent. You mentioned Ephesians 6. So as we wrap up, I want to encourage people. I mean, I know that the listener and the viewer is moved by hearing, Mark, the details. It's kind of like a story but now you really know it in detail. Make a resolution. We're coming up on halfway through Lent. Go out, participate in 40 Days for Life. Pray for Mark. Pray for his family. Pray for justice. We are pursuing this. You have our full support, Mark. We are going to get you every resource that you need.
Amen.
And we're going to win. So please pray for Mark, pray for his family. Go to 40daysforlife.com, find your location closest to you, go out, peacefully pray, and pray for our government. They need it. A lot of great men and women in the FBI and DOJ, and they're more outraged than we are, trust me, because they see the rot from within. And so pray for them as well. Thank you. Be sure to rate, review, share this podcast, and we will see you next time. God bless you.